So now we're gonna get ready and install the brake. So before we do that, we have to prepare this style of brake. Because it has the bearing races built into it, we're going to need to make sure that this is very clean, and then we lubricate it properly before we can install it. So the first thing we're gonna do is just take a look inside of here and see, and you can tell that there's a little bit of dirt and stuff in here. So we're gonna take some brake clean, and we're going to clean this out and just make sure that anything that was in there gets cleaned out of it. And so we can make sure that the towel comes out clean, that there's no metal particles or anything like that on there. Once we get these up on the car, we will actually wash them with soap and water. So any fingerprints we get on it now or anything like that, we can get off at that time.
Now, in addition to fingerprints, is there anything else when these come out of the box that we're trying to get off of there before we put the brake pads, the calipers?
Yeah, so you can kind of see there's a little light oil sheen on here, and that's a protective coating just to make sure that it doesn't rust in the box while it's sitting on the shelf. And so that needs to get cleaned off. And so we'll use, like I said, the soap and water, maybe a little stiff brush, and clean that off with a bucket of water before we put it on. Okay. So we need to get some grease inside of here, some grease on the spindle itself, and then we're gonna pack the bearings before we put them into the rotor, and then a new seal, and then we can put it on. So this is the bearing, this is the race. It's the same as that race that's in there. These should be a match set from the factory, but the Napa rotor also comes with a race already installed. So we can make sure that it's the right one. It fits down in there, it rotates nice and smooth. It's not dirty, there's no contamination in it. We've got a Napa bearing packer. This will sit down in there like this. You put the cone on top, you put the syringe through that hole, and now we can actually push this down and force the grease into the bearing. Put that bearing in there.
And we're okay having all the excess grease and stuff in there? And
absolutely, yeah. We're gonna put a seal over this. There's gonna be a ton more grease that we put down in the middle. Gotcha. And then anything that's excess we will clean off before we actually put it into use. I'm also gonna take some of this grease and put it down inside of this cavity in here. Basically, you wanna fill that cavity in the center with grease so that if it needs more in the future, it can get it from there. And then we can put this bearing back in. So this is a lip steel, and it has two lips, an inner and an outer lip, basically just to keep the dirt and water and everything out of there. A little bit of grease on here just to make sure that it's greased up. Now, if this was a torsion spring bearing, it would have a spring inside of here. Some seals you'll see, like a crankshaft seal or something like that, will have that. And you would want to fill that little cavity with grease before you put it in. That way when you're tapping it in, that spring doesn't pop out and fall inside. So we're gonna put that on here, take our seal driver. So the goal here is to drive it down evenly into that bore. And so you wanna try to get it as even as possible. Put it on there. And now we're nice and flat all the way around. We want to prepare our outer bearing as well as get some more grease on this spindle. The area we're going to grease is just in between these two bearing surfaces here and here. So we'll just slather some grease on there. So we just need to pack this. We'll put the rotor on, the outer bearing, the washer, and then the castle nut. Right over the spindle, push it in. All right, so let's put that outer bearing in.
I'll get this eventually.
And then the castle nut. All right, we'll get it finger tight for now, and then we'll do the bearing adjustment process. So we've got this rotor on, we've got the nut on, hand tight like you said, and now we're going to adjust the bearing. So what you do is, if this bearing is loose, what you'll have is play. You can hear that, right? So what you want to do is tighten this up so we'll take out all of that end play, and you'll feel it get snug right about there. What you're doing is you're balancing how much end play you have versus how much tightness you have on this nut. And so what I like to do is get it snug and then rotate the rotor and just make sure that any end play is taken up. Okay, then I'll back it off and I'll do it again, get it right up to the snug point. So now we have no play and it's snug, but we're gonna look, and this happens to line up perfectly with that 'cotter pin hole. So we can take the 'cotter pin, like that. And then we're gonna bend that cotter pin over and push down this side. And now we can get our dust cap on. And now we can repeat the whole process for the other side.
Perfect. Before we move on to assemble our calipers, install the brake pads, we're going to reconnect our sway bar with our sway bar end links, which we just had delivered from our local Napa Auto Parts store. I'm going to unbox these for you and hand one over to Daryl so we can both work on each side.
Thank you. I'm going to lift the swivel up just a little bit. It should line up really well right now. There's something else that we'll do when we do the alignment. We'll come back and try to loosen and re-tighten these again because the suspension is going to be at a completely different angle. We'll do the final tightening on it then. I believe that'll have us good for now. I got all mine contacting there. Yours is the same. Like I said, once we get it sitting on the ground at right height, we'll come back and do a final tightening on these if we need to.
So we're just going to quick wash these down. This will also remove any fingerprints or grease we may have gotten on there when we were repacking the bearings.
All right, so we've got our Adaptive One remanufactured caliper loaded with our new Silent Guard pads. And if you notice, I've gone ahead and greased the ears of the caliper as well as the piston face so that we can reduce any noise. Now we're gonna go ahead and put this loaded caliper onto the rotor. We'll put just a little bit of this silicone ceramic grease on the end of the pins where it slides into. Now this brake hose has 5 flats, and on the 6th corner it's actually rounded off, and that way it can only go in one way. If we look at this bracket with the rounded corners right here towards the bottom front, and so we're going to take this and get that to line up with right there. So once it's in, we can slide our clip that goes on this side of this bracket and slides in that way. Turn it around so that the flat side is against the bracket. There you go. That's good. So what you want to do is get it snug and then go a little more. So a banjo bolt is a hollow bolt. What that allows it to do is pass the fluid through it. So you need to have a copper crush washer on each side of this fitting. Run it in and just get it snug with this. Barely snug. And then we'll torque it to the right spec. Yeah, so that's exactly how it should run. So you've got a little bit of loop. We're at full droop in the suspension and we still have movement. So that's good. Okay. All right, and you've got it up in that channel, which locks it in place. Now what we're doing here is effectively crushing that copper washer and getting it to seal on the bolt side as well as on the caliper side. Now, one little trick I do here is I actually take a hammer and I'll just lightly tap on that and then see if it goes again and torques anymore.
What does that do?
It just makes sure that that thing seats. So you see how it turned just a little bit more?
Yep.
And that's why I do that, because it just makes sure that it gets to the right torque and everything's sealed.
Cool.